Previously on the Game On podcast.
So, as a CEO of a football club that's in the SANFL, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've identified, not only from a club point of view but from the SANFL point of view?
Yeah, I think obviously for us it is the volunteer base, trying to get the volunteers regularly because we do tend to use them as much as we can, and it does present timing issues for a lot of volunteers. But probably we've obviously got the dramas with AFL clubs wanting to leave and things like that, which create some issues at the moment. They just create an instability within the league. I mean, we have got the best second league outside, the best league outside of the AFL. Ask the players. In our recruiting each year, and we speak to many players from around Australia, they want to come to the SANFL. So we have a brand in the league that is second to none, and for us, it's just really maintaining the integrity of the brand, which is, we've got eight strong clubs that, football's played at a high level in South Australia, and I think we should be really proud of that and just keep promoting that. But that is a challenge for us.
Sportscast SA presents Game On. Game On. South Australians' destination for everything sports. Local, national, and international sports. AFL football, soccer, basketball, golf, baseball, tennis, cricket, and any other sports played in this wide world. And we're going to have a blast doing it. So sit back, relax, and let's do this thing. Welcome to Game On.
Welcome to Game On. My name's Pete. Once again, joined in the studio by Malcolm and David Cousner. We've double-checked that as well. Yes. We did quite get it a little bit wrong last night, but we've got it right now. Obviously talking about the challenges through the SANFL and a little bit of instability there with what's happening with the Crows and Port, maybe leaving, not leaving, and how that's all going to play out. Yeah,
a bit amusing. I've known David for several years, and I've always called him the wrong effectively. So, yes, a bit amusing there. Yeah, it is instability, and it's frustrating instability for mine.
Yep. Obviously, that episode is available for anyone that wants to go back and have a listen to it, but let's get into Around the Grounds.
Around the Grounds.
All right, today we're going to talk, obviously, the SANFL W. Some cricketing news that's come across the table in the last few days. But as per usual, we're going to start off with the AFL. We'll get into the hot topics right from the get-go. First one is probably the biggest one in Rory Sloane announcing his retirement. We did sort of flag it a couple of weeks ago that we thought that it might be a bit of a struggle for him to get back. He's done everything he possibly can to get back, but I think some sanity has prevailed.
I've got to be honest, I think I first knew that effectively about 6 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Look, immensely respected. I see a lot of similarities between Mark Bickley and Rory Sloane.
Yes.
Never the best player, but the consummate team man. I will say too, having done a couple of coaching clinics with Rory, he's exactly what you see. He's genuine. He was this energizer battery, joins in, enthusiastic. Mm-hmm. I will also be honest. When Belinda turned up to pick him up, let's just say the male attention of that, yes, could not have cared less about Rory then.
Yep,
yes.
No, fair call. Obviously a great career and one club player, obviously at the Adelaide Football Club. But I think the greatest honour is when you get opposition players, coaches, administrators, media personalities, all basically singing from the same hymn book in that fantastic career, fantastic team player. And I think I just saw a little article come up just recently that Nathan Buckley sort of went into his team meetings going, have we a chance of getting him? That's an honour right there.
Yeah, look, he's immensely respected, as I said. Genuine, great player. Very good player. Mm-hmm. I've got him below that level in terms of and that, but you always knew what you were going to get.
Yep.
And, it's just huge respect.
So obviously the talk's obviously been about, is he one of the Crows' best evers? That's up for debate. But when you talk about heart and soul of a team, I think he fills that criteria,
and
doesn't he?
That's more important.
Yep, fair call. All right, let's move on. Big week this week here in Adelaide with Showdown 55, Thursday night. What do we expect, considering both teams have won 27 games apiece? It's a standalone Thursday night game. Have the AFL got it right finally?
Sure. I think Adelaide, it's not school holidays anymore, so I'm not a fan of that. And also, country people, which is a huge part of the South Australian footy landscape. Mm-hmm. I think, especially Crows supporter-wise, on percentages, does make it a hell of a lot harder. But the AFL, out of that, being honest, they don't really care about that. It's their big, huge money is TV industry.
Yep.
The TV cameras, they want this. Mm-hmm. And so it's standalone Thursday night. The clubs want it because it's good advertising, etc., like that. So,
but would it have been better for Adelaide and Port to play the Friday night and Collingwood and Carlton to play the Thursday night potentially
for South Australia?
For
but let's be honest, it is an extended VFL competition.
And we've talked about that on previous occasions. Has Jordan Dawson found his best form just at the right time?
Hopefully, I think he's certainly building and getting there. To hear tonight, driving here, that Connor Rosie has passed a fitness test.
That's a big surprise.
Yeah, it is a surprise, but it certainly makes the tip. Look, I would have tipped Port anyway, but Rosie playing, meaning they've kept the dynamic three, and Drew, the fantastic four, really, are all going to play, and I think they'll just be too good for Adelaide.
That's a big risk early in the season for a young player with a hamstring when, they're resting, obviously,
they would have
Charlie and everybody else that they need to rest.
They do 8 million tests. Mm-hmm. He's passed the test.
Okay.
They're not risking him for mine.
Fair call. All right, let's move on. How much will Port miss Sam Palpepper more and more as the season goes on?
Yeah, I think so, especially if a bit of wet weather comes through. So you're going to miss his physical strength, which I think is pretty important to hustle and bustle in that forward line and pinch hit in the midfield. So, I think they will miss him, and especially more so later in the year. Fair
call. Finally, we have a standalone showcase, being the competitive nature of showdowns. Is it going to be showcased to the rest of the AFL that this is one of the all-time rivalries within the AFL?
Oh, look, there's plenty of people around. Barmy rates that it's the biggest show, it's the biggest rivalry. So there's people out there who don't. There's plenty of respect in terms of that regard and how big it is.
Yes.
So I think we all know that. So
Fair call.
Port should win easily. You look at the two sides on paper. Port bolt in, but then they won last year as well. I think, though, Port have gone ahead a little bit and Adelaide have gone significantly backwards.
Yeah, fair call. Last time they met was on July 29, 2023, Adelaide winning by 47 points. Can't see that happening again. But I was going through some of the stats today, as I like to do, just in a little bit of the spare time there. Adelaide are actually leading Port Adelaide in some interesting stats here. Adelaide are leading everything barring the inside 50s, marks, and only slightly worse on disposal efficiency and tackles. So apart from the inside 50s, which is obviously going to be the delivery, but they're getting first hands on the ball out of the middle. Yeah, all right, we have discussed that at length, that it's more of a dump kick rather than a deliver kick, so I totally get that. But in every other stat, they pretty much were leading. Adelaide are just leading Port Adelaide in that regard. So this becomes a lot closer than we actually think.
I think realistically the Crows are going to have to kick straight and Port miss a few for the Crows to win. But anything. You miss some goals, the opposition gets a couple.
Yep.
Look, let's also forget last week. Port definitely got the better of the umpiring green too last week. Mm-hmm. So who knows in that regard as well.
You do need a little bit of luck. We'll stick with Port Adelaide and Adelaide, considering this is a showdown episode. Are Adelaide as far off the mark as we think? Some close losses to some quality teams. Does that give a little bit of hope, or do we still feel like they're in that no man's land a little bit?
I still think they're no man's land. They lack that class, just so many battlers. Huge pressure on O'Brien tomorrow night. Like, there's plenty of us out there who don't rate him. Now, if Jordan Sweet beats him, who came in as Port's second ruck, puts the asset on Adelaide at not having a real crack at Soldo or Sweet.
Mm-hmm. Fair call. Interesting that Dan Curtin, I think it's been revealed that he will make his debut for the Crows. A lot of Crows supporters have been calling for that for a few weeks now. Is it the right game to bring him in for a showdown?
I've got no problem with that. I can't believe Dowling hasn't been used. I'm mystified by that. Look, Michael only showed last year. What they gave up for Curtin, I'm amazed he hasn't played yet, so I've got no problem with it.
Is offering up such high draft picks this early in the season the best way to rebuild the club moving forward?
Adelaide will have a crack at a couple of free agents. You've only got to pick up a Rankin. Suddenly, if you've got a Lukosius and a couple others, it changes things up. It doesn't need that much, but they're just, and again, they picked McCasey when Sarong was still available. There's only got to be a couple of those where you get right instead of wrong. It just changes everything massively.
And that's where Geelong have been so good previously. Richmond, obviously, before that. And Brisbane have sort of added a little bit here and a little bit there along the way. I mean, having the quality of Lachie Neale moving over was certainly a big one there. Obviously, injuries to Brodie Smith, Sam Berry, Luke Pedlar, who could potentially return from the SNFL. Butts, Schoenberg and Murphy are probably the three.
I think Butts is probably the most likely out of that three.
Being a defender.
Come in, and also probably the slightly bigger body to potentially stand Dixon.
Yes.
Although that probably would go to Keane, you would think, at this stage. So it mightn't be any of them. So
there you go. Yeah. Let's move across to Port Adelaide. Where will they find their drive from with a few key players down? Who in the SANFL is a chance to be promoted? Is it Burton,
they showed that
Cleary or McEntee?
I think at least two will play.
And Finlayson is also available as well now. But do they play him after not playing at all for a couple of weeks?
Yeah, it's also, do they want another tall for a night game? Is probably less so.
Yes. And then my last question on Port Adelaide is probably Soldo, Sweet, or both?
I'm fans of both, but I think you probably only play one of them. As I said, the pressure's on this week.
Absolutely. All right, let's continue on with a few more hot topics here. We've got, are North Melbourne in trouble if what's to be believed that club presidents do not want a 19th team?
I take that with a grain of salt, and I still think the TV rights will decide all that anyway. I still think a 20th team's inevitable, personally.
Could we go backwards to 16 teams if they get mergers which would allow additional, almost a true home and away format?
Won't happen because then you lose billions out of the TV rights.
But if you're getting two rounds, everybody playing each other twice, you're getting more games.
Yeah, I still think 20 is more likely.
Fair call. That's all right. No worries. Yeah. Who are the Crows and Port's most underrated players? We'll start off with the Crows. For me, it's Mitch Hinge.
Yeah, I'm going to go Michael Annie.
Michael Annie? Yeah. And for Port Adelaide?
I think he's injured, Pau Pepper.
I'm going to go Willem Drew.
Yeah, Willem Drew, and I think Soldo as well.
Yep.
Fair call.
That's fair. Rising Star nomination for round 7 was Jake Rogers from the Gold Coast. Absolute gun. Some Jets there.
Yeah.
Damien Hardwick's got some real talent at his disposal, hasn't he?
Those of us who saw him last year in the academy, I said that. Yeah, I said that the next week, let alone now.
Yep. So. Just needs to get game time into those, and I think the way that Gold Coast are doing it at the moment is a pretty smart way of doing it. What do we make of the Higgins suspension on Aliir? I know we've talked about it.
I think he's slightly unlucky because Aliir's gone to kick the ball, I still think he hasn't displayed due care, which is what the judge, whether we like it or not, it's irrelevant. And the players have bought into that.
Yes.
Don't out of that. So, the dinosaur bit in it has got to go.
Yep.
Now, it's going on at the moment. I've just had a look. They're deliberating at the moment. So we'll wait and see whether it goes down to whatever. But I can see on the gradings and being involved enough to not have to be help out in that regard.
Yep.
I can totally understand where Michael Christian came up with 3.
Yep.
So, wait and see.
We will wait and see on that one.
We'll probably know before the end of the night.
And we'll probably cover that in our last section of Good, the Bad, the Uglies. We'll see how that one plays itself out. What do we make of the Swans players not celebrating a goal with a teammate? Is much in it?
No, I think it's a mountain out of a molehill. We run into an open goal. The nearest Swans player is 40-odd metres away. They've gone to get a drink. I think it's, if it had been any other player, no, not a word said. So I think we're jumping at shadows.
Is it also a little bit of respect also to Hawthorn going, look, we're already beating you by so much. There's no point in sort of rubbing it in?
No, I don't think so. I think it's one of those things. And look, let's also get it right. Tyson Edwards and Andrew McLeod played years together without speaking to each other. So, don't ever think that everyone at footy clubs gets along. It's not the first time and won't be the last time over a female either.
Yep.
Get on with it.
Have Geelong showed that they have the perfect mix where no one player is actually dominating, so it's hard to shut them down?
Yeah. And look, Dangerfield's got injured again, but they've still come through. Hawkins didn't get a touch, and they've still won. Okay, Cameron then comes through, but geez.
But that's the thing,
and
isn't
Stewart wasn't playing as well.
That's the thing.
So he comes back this week, who's their best defender.
Yep.
So, look, at the moment, they're certainly in the equation.
Yep, fair call. Can we trust Carlton? Who are some of the certainties? GWS, Geelong, Sydney, or any other teams at the moment? I like what I'm seeing from GWS.
I think with Carlton, the big problem is you wouldn't have someone else's wallet on to back Harry Mackay or Charlie Curnow kicking for goal. That's the big one.
Big bodies that just can't finish.
Question. Yep. Huge. Like Mackay hasn't got a monkey on his back. He's got the whole zoo for, especially a big game, key moment. I think he's kicked better this year.
Yep.
But, geez, he missed a couple again Saturday night. So, yeah.
Interesting. GWS at the moment probably just looking that little bit better than most.
Oh, and they get Taylor and Caniglio back in the next. I think Taylor's back this week, so that's him with Stewart are probably the two premier defenders with Wiedering as well.
Yep.
So that's massive back for them. So it's a huge game this week. You can toss the coin on that one.
And Sydney obviously have some pretty good players to come back
Parker
as well.
To come back. Although Mills has now hurt himself again after his bit last year, but he's hurt himself. He's done a calf jogging, so he misses more again.
All right, and a couple more to just finish us off on the hot topics in the AFL at the moment. What are some of the rules that can be changed in the AFL? 5 on the bench, no sub.
I think that's one, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
The draw with extra time. I think it's a unique part of the game, and I know it's been talked about.
I'm still a traditionalist with a draw. I laughed where a couple of people said, oh, no, leave it, it should be next score. No, you fools. If there's a 10-goal breeze blowing that way, and no one scored down the other end all day, of course it can't be next score. It's got to be extra. It's either a draw or it's 5 minutes each way. I laugh that. I don't agree this bit of 5 players kicking for goal. No, I'm not a fan of that.
No, fair call. Obviously still on some rule changes. We've seen it in the SANFL, and we've seen it for quite some time now, the last touch out of bounds. I'd like to see that one come in.
Yeah, I think it will.
Yep.
Look, I don't like it on a windy day at Nord or at Unlegal. I certainly see I'm not, while I still don't like it, I'm not as big against it as I used to be. And I think at AFL level, the grounds they play in it, and at the moment, it's just too much conjecture. So make it, the rules are hard enough as it is. It is the most unique sport in the world to umpire. A reasonable amount of time to get rid of the ball. It's a crazy rule.
Yep.
Etc. We acknowledge those of us get frustrated that in the back's ignored. Is that deliberate or not? Everyone goes crazy. Well, at least we know in South Australia now what it is.
Exactly right. Yeah. And I think we've seen enough of a sample size now to say, look, this is not a bad little rule that's been introduced, and it's quickened up the game a little bit, and it's made teams play to the centre of the ground, which is ultimately what the AFL are looking for with the stand rule and moving that ball through the corridor.
Yeah, I see both points on that because it also depends where the +1's situated. So I can see that. But I think you're watching an AFL game at the moment, will it or will it not?
Yep. Let's just take that decision away.
And also it gets rid of a bit of the accusations and of the VFL and then or a home game here like the Port St Kilda last week.
Yep.
You know where you stand, so yeah.
And my last one on that one is players remaining in the arc, say 4 players from each team remaining in the arc to try and reduce a little bit of congestion.
It's funny out of that because they do it at junior level. Mm-hmm. So you're watching the 18s and that. And I agree. Brenton Phillips made the point to me one day where he said either have it at all grades or not at all. Where he said it's hard enough where you're watching and you're going someone like Tom Scully, who's now 3rd year on Port's list. Now, you watched at 18s level and he dominated because he had so many one-on-ones. Now, you don't get that at the other level. So you watch, you're trying to decide on a tall, skinny kid as it is.
Yep.
Well, at least
see him at the level that he's playing at, playing
so
that role.
It's
that
effectively a different game to a large extent.
That's been my bugbear for quite some time is that no matter what level and league you're at, there are different rules that are instituted for each, and it creates confusion.
Well, that's the big one. He kicked, I reckon it was 6 out of 8 for Westies one day, and we all went away going, but we're also going, but he's outmarked. He's 6 foot.
Yep.
6'18" in terms of, at that age, he was probably taller by 5 or 6 inches a kid he was standing that day. Well, he hasn't got the third guy jumping over him in the junior comp, so it's so much harder to judge.
I would like to see 4 players remain in the arc. I think that's another way with the standing rule. I think that was a very good rule that has been brought in, and you can see teams like Geelong taking advantage of that and Sydney taking advantage of that right now.
Yeah, I certainly think it would help at women's footy. Mm-hmm. I could certainly see the point.
Certainly see that go. One last one for you, mate. Would the AFL consider sharing the ANZAC round game or ANZAC Day round game? We've talked about it. Should it definitely be the grand finalists from the previous year?
I think it should be. I think it's the premier game for the year.
Well, it's the second biggest game of the year, really, isn't it?
And I think it gives gives Collingwood and Essendon a massive leg up. It's a bit of a recruiting tool that you can play in the big games. You get ANZAC Day. Also, it's effectively another finals game. So I think in that way it's too much of an advantage for mine. Yeah, I just think it should be a grand final rematch. I've always thought that.
And that's the fairest thing for
I
all,
think so.
And it's a reward for making that grand final.
Yep.
All right, let's quickly run through the results from last weekend. Richmond going down to Melbourne by 43 points. We were actually sitting here recording, watching that match. The first half or 3 quarters were
terrible,
diabolical, but Melbourne ended up getting the job done.
It was horrendous. That was certainly an advertisement. There's too many teams. Yeah, they did, but it certainly wasn't convincing.
Yep. The draw, which we have just briefly talked about there between Collingwood and Essendon, interesting game.
Yeah, saw bits of it. I went down to the Bay for the Sturt-Glenelg game. Glenelg-Sturt game.
Talk about that one in a minute. Yep.
Only saw bits of the ANZAC Day game and that, and you saw the miss from Langford and then the drop mark from Elliott, so it could have either way.
Yes,
which it always is in a close game.
And the hanger that is now going to be snapshotted around the world on any poster advertising AFL football right there, and then to finish it off with a goal was even better again. GWS really put the Lions to the sword by 54 points.
Just looked too good, and that was
quick and slick.
Yeah. That was where you go, well, I think they've got the best list, and that's a game where it showed just their extra ability and probably question mark on the Lions midfield. Is it two of the same pace? There's no doubt they're missing Ashcroft big time.
Mm-hmm.
Dunkley hasn't been quite as good. Neil's also had injury problems, hasn't been quite as well, but you'll go, and that was the thing. The Giants were too quick.
Yep.
So
And they certainly showed. Port Adelaide were a bit banged up against St Kilda, only winning by 10 points. Probably lucky to get out of that game in the end. I mean, it wasn't exactly high quality, but it was just competitive.
Yeah, which is always a Ross Lyons St Kilda side is. And again, their list is average. So I think St Kilda to be as competitive as they are is quite incredible.
Have they overachieved?
And especially with their best. I think so, because also their most important player in King wasn't playing again too. So, yeah, I think it was very good by St Kilda, and they were unlucky. So
Port Adelaide kicking 1-8 or 1-9 at one stage. Not good either.
If you do that, the opposition's in the game. Now, if they kick 6-5, 6-3, 6-4, they'd probably win by 10, 15 goals, and we go exactly as expected.
Yep. Adelaide defeating North Melbourne by 57 points. I have to make a bit of a silly comment that I thought that North Melbourne were going to be the bogey team for Adelaide, but no, they came out and did the job exactly how they were going to do.
No,
it was a silly call.
There's too many from North Melbourne just aren't up to it.
Yep.
Yeah.
One of the games of the round, obviously, Geelong defeating Carlton by 13 points.
Yeah, and that ebbed and flowed a few times, and it looked, in the last quarter, it looked like, and that Carlton missed an easy, I think it was Owies, missed an easy one, and that was crucial. So, as we know, it's a fine line between pleasure and pain.
The Dockers got back on the winning list and beat the Bulldogs by 24 points, but probably the most impressive thing has been Nat Fyfe.
Yeah, turned the clock back, didn't he? All of a sudden. So, yeah, quite... I think we thought that had gone past him in terms of to dominate a game like that again.
But I think they found a role for him, though.
Yeah, possibly. If Fyfe and Sarong can do that, then they're right in against probably the majority of sides. So, yeah.
The Suns predictably getting the job done against the West Coast Eagles by 37 points. No Harley Reid.
Yeah, and they kicked the first 3 goals of the game in the first 5 minutes, Gold Coast. And
West Coast,
West Coast, sorry.
Yes.
So you thought, wow, this could be interesting. But, yeah, then they're greater depth. Walter had an influence late as well, my pin-up boy.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's a huge game this week now. It
is.
It's a massive game. It's a toss the coin.
Absolutely. And then to finish us off, Sydney defeating Hawthorn by 76 points. A little bit like North Melbourne at the moment, just a few players that are not up to the level at this stage. Very interesting to watch Sammy Mitchell have a little bit of a spray. All right, let's get on to some tips for round 8, mate. We'll whiz through these reasonably quickly. We've already talked about Port Adelaide and Adelaide. You're going Port. I'm probably going Port just as well. Carlton v Collingwood.
De Goey in doubt for Collingwood as well, so it's a toss the coin there. I want to see the sides, but at this stage I'm going to go Carlton.
I'm going to go Carlton as well. Sydney v the Giants. For me, game of the round apart from the Showdown.
Taylor back, I'm going to go GWS.
I'm going to go GWS as well. St Kilda v North Melbourne.
St Kilda.
St Kilda for me. Melbourne v the Cats at the MCG.
Yeah, I'm going to go the Cats again. It's a toss the coin as well.
I'm going to go the Cats as well. West Coast v Essendon over in Perth.
Yeah, Reid will obviously be back.
Well, potentially. I did see a little bit of an interview with Simpson saying that they're tracking, obviously, all of their recoveries and everything, and he's not quite as recovered as what they would like. And they don't want to burn the young fella out either. But if he does play, do West Coast get up?
I still don't trust him enough. I'll go Essendon.
Yeah, I'll go Essendon as well. Richmond v the Dockers.
I'll go the Dockers. I think Richmond's injuries are just horrendous. And
it's shocking, isn't it?
I thought, that Melbourne, I thought that was a really subpar game. I thought both teams were extremely underwhelming, and Richmond fell right away.
Yep. The Bulldogs v the Hawks.
Bulldogs
for me as well. And then probably the result we've sort of going to be hanging on here is Brisbane v the Suns.
I want to see the sides, but it's at the
Gabba.
I know that, and they're none for 3 at the moment at the Gabba.
Yep. Which has been their fortress for the last 3 or 4 years, hasn't it?
Incredible. What's
gone so wrong at Brisbane? But before you get your tip, mate.
I know. It's got me beat.
Because they've got the players on paper.
I think the lack of pace is a bit more crucial than we realised.
Mm-hmm.
And Danaher and Hipwood, you're not backing either of them on consistency. Yes, they can dominate a game, but
things have to go their way for it to happen
on either of them. So it's a toss the coin. Still go Brisbane, but geez. Yeah.
I'm going to go the upset. I'm going to go the Suns on this occasion. All right, mate. We're going to take actually, before we do take a quick break, just looking at the breakdowns of the Crows and Port Adelaide over the next 4 or 5 weeks. Obviously, the Crows and Port playing each other this week. The Crows have got Brisbane, Collingwood, West Coast, Hawthorn and Richmond. Can they potentially pinch 4 out of the 5 or 6 there?
They've still been very underwhelming. They've only been good in one game this year, in the Carlton game.
Mm-hmm.
They've been putrid on several others. Fremantle game especially. Essendon game where they should have lost easily.
Yep.
So I'll say no.
Nope. Port Adelaide's next 5 or 6 weeks, they've got the Crows, Geelong, Hawthorn, North Melbourne, Carlton and GWS.
Yeah, a couple of easy, couple of hard. They've only got to split them.
Mm-hmm.
There's still a big chance for top 4 for mine.
Injuries are going to play a huge
they
part.
will. They will. And, let's wait and see.
Absolutely. All right, mate, let's take a very, very quick break. When we come back, we'll talk the SANFL, the SANFL W, and past player, past legend, Greg Quinn.
Are dents and scratches putting a dent in your day? Introducing Roger Steen Crash Repairs Adelaide, your trusted solution for automotive woes. With over 2 decades of expertise, Roger Steen Crash Repairs guarantees top-notch service, restoring your vehicle to its former glory in no time. From minor dings to major collisions, our skilled technicians handle it all with precision and care, using state-of-the-art equipment and techniques.
Roger Steen Crash Repairs saved my car. It looks brand new.
Fast, friendly and reliable. I wouldn't trust anyone else with my vehicle. Don't let accidents slow you down. Visit Roger Steen Crash Repairs Adelaide at 14 Penner Avenue, Glynde, for quality service you can count on. And here's a special offer just for our listeners. Mention this podcast and receive a $100 discount on your repair. Roger Steen Crash Repairs Adelaide. Excellence in every repair.
All right, and we thank Roger Steen Crash Repairs there for sponsoring our show, but we continue on with the SANFL, mate. Round 4 games. Some interesting results that got thrown up. Sturt obviously getting up in the ANZAC Day clash against the Tigers. You said you were down at that game.
Yep.
You're probably best to report on it. Sturt looked like they put Glenelg under a lot of pressure from the get-go.
They did, and a couple of Glenelg's leaders were very disappointing. I'll probably leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see McBean run through and crash a few packs. Yeah, I was really disappointed with his game. Look, I thought Sturt were pretty good. They bought the heat, and Glenelg wilted, so it's very interesting out of that. Luke Hosey is here to hand as well, so he could miss a few.
Yep. And Nord obviously the week before put the heat on Glenelg as well. It seems to be a common theme a little bit. Oh, well, that's what I observed during that game.
Yeah, it does. They look to be not as ferocious at the moment, so I think that would be worrying, Reva. And I think I've got a lot more of a big question mark against them than I had when I got to the game.
Yep.
Put it that way.
Fair call. All right, we move on. West Adelaide getting the job done over the Panthers. Very emotional week for the West Adelaide Football Club, but good to see them back on the winners list and doing it quite easily in the end.
Yeah, just a bit too good. South, a lot of juniors, and look, we obviously just wish Sam Mays and West Adelaide Football Club all the best there. And South just huge. Like the amount of experience they had retire all at once. It's always going to be a hard year for them. I think they realise that. Yep. And there's just a lack of support there for the kids. And also they've got a lot of injuries, and like their best kid, in Draper, is injured.
Is injured, yep. Yeah. But good on South Adelaide for giving their youngsters and their local youngsters a good go at it. And again, it's a case of just trying to keep them together for a period of time. But yeah, as a football club, you don't want to be having a lot of experience walk out of the door all at the same time. You want to try and stagger it if you possibly can. The big one for me was Central's upsetting Woodville West Torrens. Central's are the real deal, mate.
They are, but it was also a little bit interesting with suddenly I think Redden, Thompson, who else was there? There was Menzel. There was 3 or 4 all pulled out. So suddenly it was a totally different Woodville West Torrens team. Riley Knight's now hurt a calf again. He's going to miss a couple now. Mm-hmm. But
the old man injury.
Yeah, Redden comes back, and I think he's crucial. So, yeah, it did. It's a little bit one harder to read for mine. But, don't worry. Central's
are around the mark.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Exactly right.
Yep.
North Adelaide getting the job done against Adelaide there. Obviously, Adelaide taking an extended squad down to Tasmania, so missing a few players in that respect.
And Pedler now out for the season adds another one there as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Well, at least Adelaide kept that up because it looked like they were going to lose by plenty at one stage and did peg it back. Mm-hmm. So I will give it that side of things.
Oh, fair call. And then the big one at Alberton Oval, Nord getting up over Port Adelaide at Alberton under lights.
Yeah, it was a scrappy game. Nord missed a lot of goals. Nord should have won easily.
Yes.
Look, the most important thing out of the game is wish Matty Panos all the best. I understand it's quite complicated in what he's done to his knee, so we're just hopeful that the famous number 4 is back on the park before the end of the year. We've just got to wait and see on a couple of things at the moment. He's a gun. I'm still stunned. I certainly know of a in Bassett pushed him very hard at the end of 14.
Mm-hmm.
I still can't believe he hasn't been on an AFL list. I think it's just staggering.
A missed opportunity.
Oh, it's incompetence by all clubs. Staggering and unbelievable. He's a gun, and farcical that he's not a 150, 200 game AFL player.
Yep. All right, let's move on to this week's matches, mate. A couple of tips here. Adelaide v Port Adelaide in the pre-Showdown.
It's probably going to be interesting to see on those sides. Toss of the coin.
You would think Port Adelaide have that little bit more depth, but
oh no,
Adelaide.
So sure
Adelaide have got some pretty good good structure as well.
Yeah, I'll go for Adelaide. I think it's a toss of the coin.
I'm going to go Adelaide as well. North Adelaide v Nord out at Prospect Oval.
Yeah, at Prospect, which obviously Panos won't play. Let's try and get that mojo back in terms of the anti-tips. I'll go the Roosters just to try and continue to get the legs up that way.
Fair call. Then I have to do exactly the same then. Always hard to play at North Adelaide, Nord in the past, but I do like Nord's structure this year in their reserves. They do have some players pushing the league squad for spots.
Quite bizarrely, Nord play.
We did
North
flag
Adelaide
3 weeks in a row.
3 weeks in a row.
In the reserves.
I want to see a couple of the guys. It's just crazy. And a good comeback. I will say that game on the reserves game, let's just say, way too much blowing of the whistle for both sides.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I'll leave it at that.
Yep. We did flag that a couple of weeks, or last week, about them playing each other 3 weeks in a row. Just a real quirk within the SANFL structure. Can't believe that one got through to the keeper. But anyway, we move on. West Adelaide playing Central Districts out at Hisense Arena, or Hisense Stadium.
I'll go the Dogs.
I'll go the Dogs as well. Yep. And South Adelaide playing Glenelg.
Yeah, I'll go Glenelg to rebound.
Now, this one all of a sudden becomes very interesting. Sturt v the Eagles.
Yeah, look, I really want to see the sides. I think on this, before seeing the sides and trying to find out to make sure there won't be big late pullouts, I'll go Woodville West Torrens to rebound.
Yep.
Out of that, but I'll go and have a look on Sunday. Could go either way. Sturt's return to Unley Oval on Sunday.
That was what I was going to say.
On Sunday,
first
the
game
new
at
turf,
Unley. Yep.
and they promote it pretty heavily. So hopefully it'll be a pretty reasonable crowd out at Unley as well. And I think the game that could go either way.
Yep. Game of the round for me there, and I'm probably going to go Sturt fractionally at home. I think a big return. They've had to do it the hard way for the first couple of weeks in playing a few away games, so they get the benefit of
that's true.
returning home as well. So. But that doesn't always equate to a win, but let's see how they go. Yep. Just some milestone milestone games for round 5. James Battersby from Sturt playing 200 games.
Yeah, he's been a warrior. He's certainly hard at it. A great servant of the SANFL, though, in that way. So, yeah, all the best to batters on Sunday in that way.
And Chris Burgess from Adelaide playing 50 games, and Harry Grants from Central Districts playing 50 games as well, the reigning Magarey medalist.
So he's a class player, and I'm surprised he's not on an AFL list.
All right, let's move on to the SANFL W. We had wins to Norwood, beating South Adelaide, which was a really interesting result in the end.
Not sure if South rested a few, but in the last quarter it got quite interesting. If Norwood had won by 3 more goals, they could have overtaken South for second spot on percentage. So,
and yet now they're outside the 4.
So it's up for game, and of course no games this weekend because of the state game in WA. So,
Glenelg defeating Sturt there at Stratorama Oval. Also played on ANZAC Day, which I think was a great initiative.
Yeah, that was, I admit I'd gone by that stage.
Yep.
Babysitting duties. It wasn't a case of not wanting to stay
there.
No,
but great initiative that they've included them as part of the day.
I like the way how Glenelg do that.
Yep. West Adelaide getting up over the Roosters, North Adelaide.
Yeah, North Adelaide is struggling.
Yep. And very tight game between Central Districts and Woodville West Torrens. Central's getting up by 2 points.
Yeah, obviously could have gone either way. So, so it is interesting at the moment, isn't it? On the women's ladder, where Westies currently are a game ahead of Nord, but Nord are 11% in front of them. So, quite crazy stat, that one. That's very unusual. The side who is currently third is fifth as the third, easily the third best percentage. So, a couple of
interesting results.
Yeah.
Congratulations to South Adelaide being the Development League grand finalists or winners against Glenelg. Yes. So some acknowledgement.
Back there for the South Development side. So preserves women's side, however you want to phrase it. But it is Development League is its official title. Beating Lucy Weatherall's Glenelg side there. So Griff was pretty excited that the Panthers were back-to-back.
Fantastic. We hope to get Griff on at some stage. Yes, looking forward to that. Just the ladder, as you briefly mentioned right then, Glenelg sitting top, South Adelaide sitting second, Central sitting third, West Adelaide sitting fourth, and Norwood just sitting outside the top 4, basically by a game and percentage. So, game.
It's a game.
1 games. All right, mate, let's move on to cricket. Jason Gillespie named Red Bull coach of Pakistan cricket team. Are you surprised?
I think it might have been in the pipeline for a while. So not surprised. So wish Dizzy all the best there. So,
What do we expect? Obviously, Pakistan cricket, it has been a little bit all over the place for quite some time. What's his first and most important job to fix in Pakistan cricket?
Probably just establishing some relationships. But, I've got to be honest. It's not a job I would want. I would have taken. So it's interesting.
Absolutely. All right. Fraser McGurk showing impressive signs in the IPL. Is it a case that this is the format that suits him better than, say, Shield cricket or anything like that?
Temperament-wise, I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very impressive. And Steve Smith being left out of the T20 squad. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think he either opens or doesn't play. I think he showed that for the Sixers. Yeah, I've got no real beef with that.
It is a changing of the generations, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Probably a good time.
Look, he's just not a big hitter like a McGurk or that. So,
Anyway, all right, mate, let's take a very, very quick break. When we come back, Greg Quinn.
I'm Stephen Rowe, and you're listening to the Game On podcast.
Past players, past legends.
Tonight, absolute privilege to have on the line Greg Quinn. We're going to talk about, obviously, his father with Bob Quinn, his incredible career, Obviously, with that appropriately, the ANZAC Day medal is named after Bob. Also, Greg's a South Australian cricket, a huge figure in South Australian cricket, winner of 7 Charlie Walkers. We'll cover that, all that as well. Quinny, welcome aboard, mate.
Thank you, Malcolm, and Pete also. Thanks for having me tonight, boys.
Not a problem. We like to start with all of our guests about how their career started.
Yeah, no, let's go this way.
Let's go with your father's.
Yeah, we're going to go with Bob first. Now let's go through this. So you're talking 39-40 at Port, then 45-47 with the war, and then back with South Australia. 239 games, 386 goals, 12 games for Port West Torrens, so 251 games, 414 goals. 2-time Magarey medalist. We will cover that because in reality it should be 3. 3 times Port Adelaide Premiership player, Port Adelaide captain, 4-time Port Adelaide best and fairest, 2-time Port Adelaide leading goal kicker, South Australian captain, of which one of the most incredible stories comes from 45, 46, 47, 15 games for South Australia, All-Australian captain, Australian Football Hall of Fame, South Australian Football Hall of Fame, Port Adelaide's greatest team on the half-forward flank. And you made the team as keeper in that one, Quinny. Inaugural Port Adelaide #1 ticket holder in the AFL. As we said, the medal named on Anzac Day. Look, Quinny, and in the Quinn family, not just Bob, is synonymous with Port Adelaide. So go on that angle to start with, Greg.
Okay, so, my father comes from a family of 10, 5 girls, 5 boys, and my father's father, Pop Quinn, Jack.
Yep.
We know him as Pop. He also played at Port Adelaide, was best and fairest player at Port Adelaide, leading goal kicker and captain.
And captain as well, yep.
At Port Adelaide in the late 80s. Pop actually played in the Magenta. So he played in the Magenta Guernsey, and then later on, towards the turn of the century, they changed to black and white. 10 children lived at Birkenhead. Their family home was in Birkenhead, and it only had 3 fences, so 2 down the side, 1 out the front, and their back fence was the Port River. So you can imagine these days with outside pool security. imagine having 10 children and no back fence and the Port River at the back. So I reckon Grandma Mary and Grandpa Jack would have been on their toes a little bit. And the 5 boys, except one was he fell out of a tree at the age of 13 and broke his arm and got gangrene and passed away in those days. So that left 4 boys and 5 girls, and the 4 boys all played at Exeter.
Yep.
And they all played, 4 of them all represented Port Adelaide. Jack, George, Tom, and my dad Robert, well Bob. So they all played for Exeter, which was their home team on the peninsula, and they all made their way to Alberton and all played league football for Port Adelaide.
Now,
a fairly comprehensive group there.
Yeah, incredible.
Now you mentioned there that the family home was on the Port River there. Did I read somewhere in my notes here that they used to row across Port River to get to Alberton twice a week? Correct.
So Dad would often, Pop would, because at this stage when the boys were playing football, Pop had obviously finished playing for Port. So sometimes there'd be 2 in the dinghy. Sometimes, the 4 of them, 3 boys and Pop. Mainly when Dad was going, him and his father would row across the river. So Pop would build these rowboats, like these not canoes but dinghies, and Pop and Dad would row across the river, pull up on the ladder across the road at the wharf, climb the ladder, tie the dinghy off, climb the ladder, walk down to Alberton.
It's hard to believe, isn't it?
It's hard to believe. Yeah, you're talking of quite a prominent footballer here in his heyday. And Dad would drop Pop off at the Alberton Hotel. And Dad would continue on to football training and train. And then on the way back, 6 o'clock closing in those days, as we know.
Will. Yep.
And there's Pop out the front of the Alberton Hotel waiting for his son, and they'd walk back down to the wharf, climb down the ladder, and there's the dinghy tied up to the ladder, and then they'd row across to the family home again at Birkenhead. The street at Birkenhead was actually called Rand Street.
Wow.
So if you look out of the Birkenhead Tavern and you look out onto the river, there's still some pine trees there, Norfolk pines. And those pines are still standing today, and they were in Rand Street, and that was our family home.
There's one way to get to footy training, but then there's a totally different way, and I think we've beaten it by a long way right here, right now.
Yeah.
Puts another dimension with getting out of Port Adelaide safely. Yeah.
Exactly right. These days, it's it was and the thing that the family knows is that Pop used to make all these stuff. He used to make sailing ships, sailing boats. Like he went from the rowing canoe sort of a dinghy to he built sailing dinghies for the boys, and he'd take them out, 2 or 3 of them at a time, and they'd go out and fish on the Port River and sleep in these things overnight.
Incredible.
Simply because he had to get food for his family, his big family. Yep. So he'd sleep with his boys on this dinghy, with the sail up, and it would only take a boat, a larger vessel, to come up the Port River and hit this thing and wipe out, virtually all of the Quinn boys.
Yeah.
But they used to sleep out overnight and go fishing. Incredible times.
Okay, so 34-35, Port actually lost a grand final, and Bob had played. Then 36, so stateside, Port won the flag, and they came from 5 goals down at half-time to defeat Sturt. So, and then the incredible one the next year. So the McGarry medal, he loses to Harold Dribblerhawk, 37 votes to 36, and they bought in that year a voting system of 5, 3, and 1 instead of the normal 3, 2, and 1. Now, if it had been 3, 2, and 1, Bob actually would have won the medal, 23 votes to 22. So it's quite incredible, that bizarre system where they just bought it in for 1 year cost him a McGarry medal.
Yeah, well, that was one of his talking points, and one of his. He had a really good year that year, and he also won the goal kicking in 37, and so he had a reasonable year, and it was just one of those things. I don't know who knows what administration was like in those days, but I suppose they thought, it's what happens, and he didn't talk about it much, but he didn't worry him too much, but he seemed to get on pretty well with most of the blokes he played footy against, and he never sort of worried about it too much, but he had a good year that year. That was his, a premiership year, and Port Adelaide. I think he won the best and fairest that year as well in 37. So leading goal kicker, best and fairest, and the premiership that year. I think he had a few things to celebrate anyway, and that's the way he was. He would have celebrated that with his teammates rather than the individual award.
And he got on with it, won the McGarry the next year anyway.
He didn't wait too long to get his first.
No, he didn't have to wait very long. The next year he was, in those days, he was fairly prominent in those days, and he was, I don't know if you've seen pictures before the war and pictures after the war, but in 37, 38, when he first started, 36 or whatever it was, halfway through 35 or something, I've got a picture home here of him in his, they're called prison bars, but they're actually they're named after the wharf pylons. But that's another controversial thing that we won't. I don't think we can cover.
We won't touch that one. No.
But he was huge. He was a big boy, and no weights or anything in those days. And all the boys were like that. All the boys were big and strong because they all worked on the wharf. They're all like their father.
Yeah.
Pop, he worked on the wharf, and all the boys, the four that were left, they all they worked on the wharf as well. And he was huge, like very strong, no weights, no gym. Dad used to go and fight on Wednesday nights. He had a friend of his, and he used to go and fight in a room, and that was his extra bit of training.
And then 39,
Yep.
captain coaches Port to a flag. Huge year.
Huge year for him. I presume after the McGarry medal, they sort of thought, well, we've got to get this bloke organised. So he was the premiership player in 39, and also captained in 39, and captain coached in 39.
Yeah.
And we didn't know what was around the corner, but things turned out that he had another really good year, and as captain coach, and and a premiership as well. So there were a lot of things that he achieved individually, but also he loved the team side of things, and he loved just being around the team. And then of course the war broke out, and that was sort of what happened in 1940.
Now, might just take a quick step backwards there. That obviously players moving about all over the country these days and playing in different states. I read in my notes there that he got an opportunity to head over to the VFL for potentially Geelong or St Kilda.
No, it was St Kilda.
St Kilda.
His brother had gone. His elder brother Tom had gone to Geelong.
Right. Okay.
After a 1927 interstate game, Tom was played for South Australia and was best on ground.
Mm-hmm.
So then Geelong came hunting Uncle Tom and gave him a job in the Ford factory, and he went across. And Uncle Tom's career at Geelong is outstanding. Tom's a member of the team of the century at Geelong as well. Two-time premiership player, coach, captain, did all the.
Is that where your affinity with Geelong comes from?
It certainly does,
right.
Malcolm. Yeah.
Quinny's a fanatical Geelong man.
Yep.
In fact, if Port played Geelong in the grand final, Quinny's still on the blue and white hoops, I think.
There you go.
Yeah, I am. I'm Uncle Tom took me and my brother into the 1967 grand final, 109,000 people at the MCG, and took my brother and myself into the change rooms before the game and under the rope. And I'm standing next to, as a 13-year-old, standing next to Doug Wade getting rubbed down, and Peter Sharrock, Peter Polinelli, Graham Farmer, Bill Goggin,
Polly.
and I was hooked, line and sinker since that day. So
starstruck.
But I'm an avid Magpies supporter, and have been a member and continue to be a member of the Magpies for Port Magpies for forever.
At least with Quinny though, he's got bloody Geelong car rings, so it is actually easy to find when he loses his keys. A few of us may have helped you along those lines at various times, Quinny. So
yes, it has, mate.
Yes.
Yep.
Look, now please take this in whatever way you want now. So Bob's now enlisted in the Australian Army as a warrant officer class 2, while still serving as captain coach of Port Adelaide, and then to Brookhapp. He's shipped out to fight in the North African campaign.
Yep.
How much do you know about all of that, and whatever got discussed with you kids about everything, Greg?
It's a sad part of my story, Malcolm, and every time I speak of this part of my father's life, it is emotional, and I'll apologise before I get carried away. In 1940, after I think it was 6 or so games into the season, him and his brother George, his younger brother George, go into Port Adelaide, and there's a box there where you can enlist for the AIF.
Yep.
So the pair of them go up to the window and tell the bloke they want to enlist. So, no worries, come through, boys. So they enlist. Dad's no problem, but his brother George is underage.
Yes, sorry,
And so Dad tells the bloke that, George is old enough. And so they take George on his brother's word that he's old enough to be in the AIF, and they both join, go back home, tell their parents that they've joined. No correspondence with their parents about joining. The pair of them just did it off the bat. Go back home and they tell their parents that they're both enlisted in the AIF, and before you know it, they're both shipped off to the Middle East, and they don't keep him in the same battalion. Georgie goes to a different battalion. Dad goes into the 2nd 43rd. And George gets killed, doesn't come home, and my father had to live with that for his whole life. That he lied is a very strong word, but he told the bloke there that his brother was old enough, and he wasn't, and Dad had to live with that. And it's a part of my. I get asked a lot about this, and I lose it every time, and I'm on the verge of losing it now. But it's a part of my dad had to live with that all his life, and I'm positive, boys, that it was part of his motivation, and just to lose his brother. And they said that, like, out of the young one fell out of the tree and was killed with his gangrene, but there were 4 boys left. And the story that goes back is that George, the one that enlisted with Dad, was the better out of all of them on the football field. That's just the story that we get from people around Exeter, and we've done a little bit of homework. They said he was a brilliant footballer, and he must have been good to be better than Tom and my dad. So they reckon that he only played 9 games for the Magpies, but they said that he was a terrific footballer. And Dad, quietly and methodically as he was, very quiet person, my father, had to live with that unfortunate thing, and so he gets shipped off, and away they go, and Georgie gets nailed, and Dad continues on with his career in the armed forces in the Middle East.
Just incredible. Now, mate, no secret here. I want to read this out, Greg.
Yep.
Warrant Officer Quinn was ordered to take command of the 10th Platoon and blow up a barbed wire barrier and attack an enemy post from which a machine gun was inflicting heavy casualties. To blow up the barbed wire, they had to jump out of a trench and lay a Bangalore torpedo, an explosive charge placed on the end of a long extendable tube. And an unrelenting haul of fire, Quinn looked at his men in the trench and told them they were probably facing death, and he would lay the last pipe, the most difficult of all because it was the closest to the machine gun. One by one, Quinn ordered his men to jump from the trench and place a pipe under the wire. Only 3 of the 7 came back. It was then Quinn's turn. He was hit by shrapnel, which put a hole in the top of his right thigh, but he still put the last pipe down, which ultimately made this crucial mission successful. On his way back to the trench, Quinn picked up a wounded mate, was hit again, this time in the face, prompting another to say, "Hell, Bob, half your face is blown away." Quinn responded, "Any change would be an improvement." Now that's Jesus, Quinny, that's explosive. That's hitting.
Yeah, and that's the Aussie larrikin that we love, and Ashley Porter actually interviewed my dad at his home in Banksy Park many years ago, and of course after the war. And my father, that particular effort that they had to lay the Bangalore bombs, what the Germans did was they laid barbed wire, and they virtually made the Australians come into what was known as the killing field. So they left alleyways for them to walk through or to try and get through, and then the machine guns would cut them down. So it was actually a bit of a killing field. And this particular mission that Dad and his boys took on, they had to blow this barbed wire apart, but they're still in full frontal of these machine guns. And Dad was very protective of his group. He told Ashley Porter the story, and actually said to Ashley Porter, you're not to print this story until all of those boys have passed away, and I might be one of them. And he made Ashley, and Ashley won't mind me speaking about this, not to print that story until they'd all passed away, because in Dad's words, some of the boys didn't want to go because they'd been seasoned people in Tobruk and they'd seen a lot of things, and they'd been, hammered for a long time in Tobruk, months and months and weeks and weeks. And these boys, it finally got to them that they didn't want to do it. And the boys that went got nailed, and Dad was, as it said, was in the last, because he laid the last connection of the Bangalore, and that was closest to the machine gun nest. And, as it said, the three of them got out, and Dad had to carry one out, and he made Ashley say, swear that he wouldn't print the story until all of those boys were dead, because they wanted to go, but then they didn't, so it was just, he was protective of the boys that were with him. And it's a horrific story of how many, when I say boys, lost their life that particular night, and Dad was lucky to get out with his life. And I think the boy that he carried out, I'm not too sure of the history of the guy that he carried out, whether he passed away on the medical ship or whether he actually got him back alive or not, but that's what he did. And he was, it doesn't happen very often, but he got commissioned, which meant that he got upgraded to a lieutenant, to an officer in the field. So when they say in the field, it's in the battlefield.
Yeah.
So he was commissioned as an officer in the field of war, which doesn't happen very, very often. You might know someone that's in the army and just ask how many times that's happened. It hasn't happened very often.
No.
And it's also difficult for me, boys, to I find it difficult to speak about my own, but it's just the fact that it's my father and what he did. That's what happens. I have to speak about it, and I'm sorry if this brings back any bad memories for anyone that's listening, but it was something that we're proud of him, that he was commissioned in the field to be an officer. So because of that night,
unfortunately, with war, no one's the winner, really, are they?
Correct, and he was a living example of that, where he was a hard man. Both my brother, we played sport, and my sisters did as well, but he was hard but fair, honest, and fantastic. If only I realised now just how important he was to me with my sport, I might have been better at it. But he asked a lot of us simply because he gave a lot. So that's part of it.
And so come after the war. So of course we've got the war sides, combined sides, and it's Port and West Torrens together to start with. He comes back, and his first game is Port West Torrens playing Nord North.
Yep. And
he gets a standing ovation. It's pretty significant too, mate.
Yeah. Apparently the crowd, there was paper write-ups about it because he was a Magarey medalist before the war, and a prominent footballer. There were articles about him, and they sort of followed him a little bit when he was at war, and then for him to get heavily injured in Tobruk, and then the 2nd 43rd got repatriated back, and then the Japanese were invading New Guinea. So, of course, the old boys' luck, the 2nd 43rd get redeployed to New Guinea. So he goes up there and he fights in New Guinea and gets wounded a couple of more times, once in the arm, and then he had a shoulder or facial, another thing that happened to him in the war, and up there in New Guinea. And so, in all, I think I'm fairly lucky to be on this earth. There's a couple of occasions where he probably should have been killed in battle.
Bloody oath.
Liking this podcast? Please like, rate, and subscribe.
We thank Greg there for part 1 of our 2-part series with Greg Quinn. And
I could listen to Quinny tell stories about his dad Bob all night, and he's certainly a person I massively respect. within South Australian cricket circles as well.
When you text me that you had his contact details to get him on the show, definitely very, very excited there. And sit back next week and part 2 will be on its way. Let's get into happy days, mate.
Happy days.
Happy birthday this week to Taylor Walker. His former New South Wales scholarship player with the club has drafted, obviously, at pick 75 in the 2007 draft. Previously captained Adelaide from 2015 to 2019. In 2020, Walker became Adelaide's first all-time leading goal kicker.
He's a man I've got enormous time for, enormous respect, really enjoy his company. And, yes, Wayne Wacker put that up pretty early on in the morning on Taylor's birthday, and it was always entertaining, as always, some of the comments there.
Walker spent his first year at the Crows playing for Nord. Again, like we've had a couple of times with those players, that the AFL players went back to SANFL clubs once upon a time, kicking more than 50 goals in 2008 in the 2008 season. He made his...
Still trying to find a copy of his... we think it was his first... It was either his first or second goal for Nord. He went on the left foot and kicked it from 50 yards out. And Tex has given me that job, and guess what? I'm still court-marsh bowl Lily, no score on that at this stage.
That might be one for me to try and find as well. Yeah. Taylor Walker obviously making his debut in round 1 of the next season against Collingwood. Held his place in the side for the next 12 rounds, including a 5-goal performance against the reigning premiers Hawthorn in round 10, which earned him an AFL Rising Star nomination. It's funny, these Rising Star nominations, they generally go on with it, don't they?
I just got a lot of... in terms of... I'll go back to the day at Nord where... the MMD Day, honouring Chris Grigg and Damien Lane at Nord. Now, that was a day the Crows were playing Richmond on the Friday night in Melbourne. He could have easily said, sorry, Malcolm, it's just too hard.
Mm-hmm.
No, he rang me. He got the first flight back, the red-eye flight back to Adelaide, and was at the parade by, it's 10:15, 11:15, met him by the players' race. And
yep.
Yeah, honestly, you won't have me saying a bad word about him. You know how fiercely strong I'm still so angry about that other part.
Yes, well, we'll leave that alone. Walker's final tally last year was 76 goals in a season. That is almost his best at the Crows since Tony Modra in 1997, where he won the Coleman Medal. Walker capped off his best career season with his first selection as All-Australian team. It's hard to believe that it's taken this long for him to get in.
Yeah.
And his personal best of 16 Brownlow votes that year.
Huge year. Great
had
year.
An absolute year. So happy birthday this week to Taylor Walker. We move on to soccer. 2019 Argentine forward Lionel Messi scores twice for his 600th goal for FC Barcelona in the 3-0 home win over Liverpool in the Champions League semi-final. Again, on the Mount Rushmore as far as soccer players go, and generally well liked around the world as well. Obviously playing in America as well.
I think another point too. Let's go back on Taylor Walker. Really appropriate that he happens to be there this week with his friendship with Rory Sloane and the families too. It's not just Taylor. The families do a lot of things together.
Yes.
Belinda and Elle do a lot of things, and then all the kids. So yeah. Appropriate there with Tex in terms of Sloane retiring as well.
Half the reason why I did put it in this week. The one that I was thinking about putting in was Taylor Goad, but I know that would have got you going as well, so we'll leave that one alone. All right, let's move on to basketball. 1988 seems a little while ago now, but after scoring 50 points in Game 1 of the NBA Eastern Conference Playoff Series, Michael Jordan adds 55 in the Chicago Bulls' 106-100 win versus Cleveland. In Game 2, he scores 50-plus points for the first consecutive player to do so in consecutive playoff games.
He's my number one basketball.
Me too as well. All right, let's move on to tennis. A little bit of a controversial one back in 1981. This is a big one, mate. Tennis player Billie Jean King acknowledges her relationship with Marilyn Bennett, becoming the first prominent sportswoman to come out back in 1981.
Barnett. Yeah, look, isn't it funny nowadays?
It's accepted.
Yeah. So at least it's an area society's moved ahead.
Yep.
Yeah.
Paving the way, obviously, for those announcements to come out these days.
I think the more it happens, the better.
The better.
I think Ian Thorpe. My understanding is he would like to have done that earlier, and and it should have happened.
Yep.
So it's an area where we've improved.
And we can only get better.
It's still an area to go.
Yep. And to finish us off today, happy days. In 1951, we're really going back here. But future baseball Hall of Fame slugger Mickey Mantle hits his first career home run in the 8-3 win versus the White Sox in Chicago.
Yeah, famous name, isn't it? It's also a great name too, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, Mickey Mantle. It's
Yep.
It's huge.
Big tick to the parents there for calling him Mickey Mantle. All right, Matt, let's take another very, very quick break. When we come back, we'll get into the extra time big finish.
Hi, I'm Rachel Spawn, and you're listening to the Game On podcast.
Extra time, big finish.
All right, a bit of a short list here today, but we'll kick off with tennis. Rafa and Alex De Minaur go 1-1 against each other in the last two tournaments on clay. Scary thing is Rafa's actually hitting some pretty good form coming into the French Open. This is the worry, isn't it?
Yeah, you'd almost would have preferred it the other way around, building momentum. But, look, you give Rafa a chance, a very, very outside chance to win the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
You probably go even more outside in terms of De Minaur.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just impressive that Rafa's back on the court anyway. All right, let's move on to the NRL. Go through the table very, very quickly here. Sharks sitting on top, Storm sitting second, Panthers sitting third, Seagulls fourth, the Broncos fifth, the Dolphins sixth, and the Roosters and the Dogs rounding out the top eight. A little bit of separation for the first 3 or 4 teams, almost a bit like the AFL at the moment.
Yeah, the wheat from the shaft starting to get sorted out.
A little bit.
Yeah.
One that came across the desk a couple of weeks ago is that is Adelaide a potential venue for the Magic Round? And then following on from that, could they potentially reactivate the Adelaide Rams?
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
Could SA support a rugby team, a national rugby team?
I'd like to know financially what you need, what crowds do you need, what sponsorship do you need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not sure.
It was a far from failed experiment the first time round, that I believe anyway.
Yeah, but obviously financially,
it's a big commitment.
It's a big thing.
Yep. All right, let's move on to soccer. Round 26, huge win for Adelaide United against Brisbane Roar 4-3, but unfortunately, obviously leaving their run a little bit too late.
Too little, too late.
They were 4-1 up in that game there, and a couple of late goals to Brisbane sort of made it interesting. But solid team performance. There were some good signs that the structure is working, just needs to be a little bit more consistent. They've got one more game, obviously, to play, which was a make-up game against the Central Coast Mariners, which I believe is tomorrow night, which will be Wednesday, because we're recording a little bit earlier this week on a Tuesday. Do we see them trying a few things now that results are sort of out the window and they're pretty much all guaranteed finishing 8th?
Yeah, you would think so. Why not? I admit, soccer-wise this week, my big result was QPR defeating Leeds 4-0. Some of us were up at 4:30 on Saturday morning following that game, and the other half didn't understand why I was quite excited at 6 o'clock in the morning. Thought I was being rude to wake up the neighbours.
Well, I've got a few weeks possibly coming up where I won't be doing too much but watching sport on TV, and I reckon I might catch a few EPL games early in the morning when I'm going to struggle to sleep.
Championship playoffs too.
Absolutely. One last one on the soccer. Will we see a promotion and relegation system work in the A-League moving forward, considering there just seems to be a lot of instability with the A-League at the moment? Is it a way of fixing it?
Possibly, but just again, what do you need financially, and could a club come up with that to recruit straight away? And I just think there might be too big a gap between the haves and the have-nots in that way. It almost needs, you've got to get a second division going so you know what the requirements are. At the moment, until that happens and you know what the difference is,
Yes.
yeah, I think it's probably a little bit hard at the moment.
Yep. We probably could have put this in the run sheet a little bit earlier, but we've left it to now. But Live Golf was another huge success here in Adelaide.
Massive.
Almost 95,000 people in attendance, and Brandon Steele took the individual honours. But wasn't it fantastic that Ripper GC, the Australian team, taking the teams event in the first Live playoff history? And that's hard to believe considering we've had a few events now.
No, look, incredible success. Well done to Peter Malinauskas and Nick Haslam and everyone involved there. It's incredible that in 2 years it's effectively become the major golf tournament in Australia. Like bigger crowds in Australian Open, etc.
Yep.
And it's in little old Adelaide, and it's another massive tick to us in terms of that and gather around and just how much money that is bringing into the state.
It helps.
Huge.
It helps fix a few problems, doesn't it?
Yeah. Which some people don't seem to get.
The chicken and the egg scenario. An event like this obviously poses the question that the PGA have lost a massive opportunity to have more events down in Australia in general.
Yeah, and I agree. Yeah, no doubt about that. And to hear Greg Norman say that it is the biggest live tournament in the world, and it's here, is huge.
It's a big tick, isn't it?
Yep, massive.
All right, a couple of general questions to finish off. You did touch on it very, very briefly there, and I was glad you pulled yourself up on it. But is Adelaide the pop-up event capital of the world? Live Golf, Gather Round, the Velo 500, the Tour Down Under. I think we do the pop-up scenario better than most.
Oh, it's huge. And the Tour Down Under crowds, that gets forgotten. But that's stable, and you hear the cycling people. And let's be honest, we've got to listen to them. And when you've got the pro cycling, of which it's a far bigger overseas than what it is here, cycling in general.
But people come here for it.
And speak so glowingly about it. Yeah, I do. You've got to say, yeah, Melbourne and the G, purely crowd numbers, but geez, we've got a claim. We really are a massive sporting state and are huge and should be so proud of what we're doing.
Absolutely. And when you think about it, and that's why I called it the pop-up event state, on the basis that stuff all gets popped up and then popped down and everything's back to normal 3-4 weeks later, in most cases, except for the Velo 500. Obviously, they take a fair while to dismantle that.
Yeah, which a lot of things doesn't make sense where it's not permanent structures. It's quite crazy.
I totally agree. Yeah. But you have a look at the Live Golf. The Grange Golf Course looked fantastic. Amazing. They've obviously increased some of the patronage there and the events. And then, like you said, the Tour Down Under. So, yeah, I think we've got a good claim there that we should be very, very proud of.
And Gather Round is just huge.
It is. Carlton looking to move back to the MCG instead of Marvel. What are your thoughts on that, mate? Just back on the AFL?
It makes sense.
If you're talking about pure numbers.
Pure numbers, it does make sense. It'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Is it a case of teams that are struggling a little bit, say like your Hawthorns, your North Melbourne, St Kildas, who generally go out of Marvel anyway, but they do rotate around through, or Richmond potentially moving to Marvel? I know Damien Hardwick didn't like travelling down the road.
I don't reckon. I think Richmond's supporter base is still too big for that. But it'll be interesting to see if it becomes a bit of a dogfight for who gets the G again. Mm-hmm. So I understand where Carlton are coming from. So it'll be, let's wait and see.
And one last one, we did touch on it a little bit earlier. Could we see the AFL reduced to 16 teams with the opportunity potentially of playing each other twice? Who are the teams that could potentially merge? Bulldogs, St Kilda, maybe?
I just still think it's too hard. You heard Wayne Jackson, just the frustration with not getting North Melbourne to move. And you saw the Tins come out, say Footscray, when they were gone. Mm-hmm. It's happened here. Sturt were gone.
Yes.
Glenelg were virtually gone.
And now they're somewhat two of the powerhouses of the SANFL.
So I just, I still think it's very unlikely because of the TV rights for it to go smaller. So,
fair call. All right, mate, you're good, the bad, the ugly for the week.
Good Live Golf. I think that's got to be the major tick for the week.
Yes.
bad. You know what? I'm going to go, just purely because we were watching it, the Richmond-Melbourne game. Like, if you'd broken TVs in that, I reckon you could have sent both clubs the bill justifiably out and that qualified on the bad and the ugly for sure.
You sort of stole my thunder with the ugly there. I thought it was very ugly. My good was definitely, again, the Live Golf on the basis that not only did Australia win the teams event there, and I did see an interview with one of the commentators saying that, they asked Cam Smith whether, he wanted to win the individual event or the teams event. He had to stop and think, and I think that's the bonus of this structure, is that it allows that to happen. So my bad for the week is probably the Aaliyah Higgins tackle. Again, if Aaliyah hadn't have gone for the kick, maybe, but then the tackle was incorrect.
Should have let go of his arm.
Correct. So it's a bit of a bad one from both there, and I think they both contributed. So I know you've got it up on screen there as to what it's
over
looking.
an hour now that they've been deliberating. So it's, in other words, they don't know what to do by now themselves.
Is it a case of a biomechanic may have came in and sort of thrown the spanner in the works with Aaliyah?
Well, they didn't let someone speak.
Yep,
that didn't come through because it was too late. But it's been back and forth almost. It's been like a game of ping pong or chess. And,
and that's been probably my bad for the week, is that it's thrown up another unknown situation. We all know, trying to protect the head and everything else that goes along with it. So, all right, we might leave that one there. I don't think we're going to get a result by the end of this conversation, so we'll leave it as is. Mate, I thank you once again for your time tonight on the podcast. We thank Greg Quinn tonight for his time, and like we said, we're going to split that one up into a couple of different episodes. Until next week, we promise to do better. See you, mate.
In this crazy world we live in, we all need the distraction. Enjoying the show? Like, rate, and subscribe. Hook up and connect with us on social media at SportsCast SA. We'll see you next time on Game On.